Screams tore through the crystalline courtyard of the Galactic Peace Academy, echoing off spires that scraped the low-hanging stars. Zarak's 6 limbs scrambled in blind panic across the polished obsidian floor, his translucent wings fluttering uselessly against his back. A cluster of students turned, eyes wide as the insectoid careened past, knocking over a holographic display that fizzled and sparked with collapsing starlight projections. "Predator!" Zarak screeched in garbled panic, his translator crackling as his thorax collided with a plinth. He rolled to the base of a towering sculpture, quivering. "Savage terrestrial predator. Bioform loose on campus. Lockdown protocols now." A shadow passed across his compound eyes. Heavy, unhurried footsteps clicked closer. A human boy strolled into view, hands tucked in the pockets of a charcoal uniform, his expression unreadable beneath a mop of dark hair. Behind him trotted a massive, shaggy beast, all paws and tongue and an undignified trail of drool. Its tail wagged like a slow pendulum, brushing the air with lazy arcs. Jason Rourke stopped beside Zarak's huddled form and looked down. "That's Max," he said simply. "He's my puppy." Zarak's breathing came in sharp clicks and buzzes, his mandibles twitching. The beast, Max, padded forward, tongue lolling, and sniffed at Zarak's trembling antennae. The alien flinched. Max yawned. Jason whistled, and Max obediently sat. "I assure you," Jason said, his voice flat and even, "he's house-trained." A silence bloomed in the courtyard like a soundless detonation. Students exchanged glances. A few chuckled nervously. Others stared at Jason as though he had introduced a live explosive into a meditation chamber. Zarak scrambled backward, antennae stiff with distrust. You brought a feral Earth predator into an educational sanctuary. He's a registered companion animal under Terran Alliance Protocol 12. Section C. Jason offered a laminated datapad with casual indifference. A pause, then a dry, papery voice cut in from above. "Mr. Rourke, kindly report to the Hall of Governance." Dean Nalos hovered down on anti-grav lifts, his 4 pale eyes narrowing. His robes rippled with a static hum, and his presence drained warmth from the air. Jason glanced once at Max. The dog gave a soft bark. "We're on our way." The Hall of Governance was as sterile as it was magnificent. Vaulted ceilings projected rotating star charts overhead, casting shifting light across metallic seating. Representatives of 23 interstellar species lined the tribunal, some chittering through voice synth modules, others blinking patiently with lens-covered eyes. Jason stood alone in the center of a light ring. Max sat obediently beside him, panting lightly. "Explain yourself," said the Los. "This creature has disrupted operations, caused psychological trauma, and violated several interspecies comfort regulations." Jason folded his arms. "He hasn't attacked anyone. The only trauma caused was from misunderstanding. A reasonable reaction," countered a thorny-skinned Ithari counselor. "On Earth, these canines are genetically engineered for aggression. Guarding, hurting, mauling. Their kind has caused fatalities." Jason raised a brow. "And yet, you admitted me." There was a murmur. Jason pressed on. "Humans adapt. We train. We rehabilitate. Max is my guardian, my partner, and he's been through more than anyone in this room can imagine." Zarak, seated on a lower bench, avoided his gaze. His antennae curled protectively. "Perhaps," said the Los slowly, "but is it wise to bring Earth's more primitive companions into a haven of fragile diplomacy?" Jason's jaw tightened. "Max is not primitive. He's loyal. He's a protector. Protector of what, exactly?" Jason's eyes lingered on the Los for a heartbeat longer than necessary. everything that matters. The tribunal recessed for deliberation. Jason was told to remain in his assigned dormitory. Max was temporarily restricted to quarters. They walked back in silence, corridors dimming as night protocols activated. Bioluminescent moss glowed along the curved walls, throwing long shadows. Zarak stood outside the humans' dormitory when they returned. Jason didn't stop. Come to accuse him again? Zarak hesitated. I came to observe. Max gave a low, rolling growl. Jason shot him a warning glance. Max fell silent, but remained fixated on Zarak. The insectoid tilted his head. Why does it watch me like that? He's reading you. I'm not a book. Jason finally turned. He's not looking at your shape. He's listening to your heartbeat, your breath, your scent. He knows more about what you feel than you do. Zarak's wings rustled uneasily. What does he sense? Jason looked away. Fear. I fear him. Jason didn't respond. Zarak tried again. Why bring such a creature? You could use drones, AI defense fields, personal shielding. They can't smell fear. Jason keyed his door open, and it slid back with a hydraulic hiss. Max trotted in. Before following, Jason added, You should ask yourself what you're afraid of. Him or something else. The door shut. The academy functioned with quiet efficiency, but word spread like solar flares in a dense field. By mid-cycle, Jason found himself alone in mess halls, stairs trailing him like shadows. Max remained close, eyes constantly scanning. It wasn't the dog that unnerved the others. It was Jason's calm, his silence, his refusal to defend himself with anything louder than a sentence. Even when summoned again to Thalos' office, he never raised his voice. Your presence here grows problematic, the dean said. Jason nodded. Then let me make myself useful. Thalos studied him, fingers steepled. Useful how? Security diagnostics, perimeter faults, psychological assessments. You believe this is about more than a dog. Jason didn't blink. You have a breach. Thalos leaned forward, curiosity slipping past formality. Explain. Jason tapped his temple. Max isn't barking at people. He's reacting to something none of you can hear. Something that's already here. Thalos said nothing. Jason left the office under increased surveillance. That night, Jason sat cross-legged on the floor of his dorm, one hand resting lightly on Max's thick fur. The dog's ears flicked, nose twitching. The lights were off. The air was still. Jason whispered, I know. I feel it too. Max growled, soft, low, directed at a vent in the far wall. Jason stood slowly, eyes narrowing. He tapped his wrist pad. The system responded in silence. Infrared sweep. Biosensor overlay. Nothing. But Max didn't move his gaze. Something was there, watching, pressing against the edges of awareness like a splinter in the mind. Jason's muscles tightened. He sat again, pulled Max closer. The dog leaned against him. Tomorrow, Jason said quietly, we start the hunt. Zarak lay awake in his chamber, the lights dimmed to mimic his homeworld's twilight. He couldn't sleep. His mind buzzed with contradiction. The dog had not attacked. The human had not threatened. And yet, the way Max had growled at the empty air, the tension in Jason's jaw, the warning, the fear beneath calm. He recalled Jason's words. You should ask yourself what you're afraid of. Zarak had assumed it was the dog. But now, he wasn't so sure. A silent corridor. A flicker in the lights. A maintenance drone paused mid-task, its sensors adjusting. A soft scratching sound echoed behind it. Then nothing. Its lights blinked once, twice, and then it was gone. Zarak would remember, much later, that this was the night things began to change. Not when Max had growled, not when Jason had spoken, but when the fear began crawling down into the roots of his mind. Quietly, like something settling in, and he would remember how, despite all logic, He wished he was walking beside the human boy and his savage earth animal. The next day dawned thin and gray. The planetary light diffused through the Academy's atmospheric veil like gauze drawn over a wound. Jason moved through the halls with Max at his heel, silent and alert, both of them drawing stares not of mockery now, but of something closer to wariness. The kind of apprehension that stalks the air before a storm breaks. He paused at the entrance to the auxiliary archives, where sensor logs and maintenance readouts fed in from the outer infrastructure. He keyed the door open, checked the corners. Max stepped in first, nose twitching, before giving the faintest wag of his tail. Clear. Jason followed. Inside, the room buzzed with subdued energy. Cool blue screens reflected off the metal-ribbed walls. Data streams scrolled endlessly, encrypted and ignored for months. Jason sat, tapped in a diagnostic sequence, and let the rhythm of processing wash over him. 3 minutes later, he found it. "Look at this, boy," he muttered, narrowing his eyes. A series of temporal disturbances in the vent systems. Not malfunctions, recorded shifts in air pressure, heat exchange, and biological traces that didn't match any known species logged in the Academy system. Always near auxiliary paths. Always near vents or crawl spaces. And always moving toward the student habitats. Max growled low and deep. Jason leaned closer to the screen. The movements weren't random. They were methodical, probing, testing defenses without tripping them. He didn't need a full biometric read to know what that meant. Someone, or something, was inside the Academy. It had been for weeks. And now it was hunting. He pulled the logs, encoded a security overlay, and slotted the data into a slim drive clipped to his belt. As he stood, Max stiffened, ears forward, nose pointing to the vent in the far wall. Jason followed the line of his gaze. The grate was ajar by no more than a centimeter, but the air coming through it was wrong. Too cold, laced with something coppery and faintly organic. Jason didn't hesitate. He reached for the emergency seal switch and slammed his hand down. The vent hissed closed. A soft thud echoed from within. Then silence. He and Max stood motionless for a moment. Then Jason exhaled. Time to pay the Los a visit. Zarak stood in the upper observation deck, wings folded tight, staring down at the campus fields where students practiced aerial maneuvering. He hadn't slept again. His instincts, refined through generations of survival against predatory fauna, were screaming. Something hunted in the periphery. It didn't care for rules. It didn't care for species. And for some reason, only the human seemed to see it. A rustle at his side made him turn. Jason stood there, his face grim. Max waited behind him, eyes locked on the corridor they'd just come from. "I need your access codes," Jason said. Zarak blinked. "For what purpose?" "There's something in your vent systems," Jason said flatly. "It's not supposed to be here." "Define something." Jason stepped closer. "You wanted to understand what I brought. Let me show you what followed." Zarak hesitated, antennae twitching. "You believe it followed you?" "I believe it smells what I smell," Jason said. "Fear, weakness, complacency." Zarak stared at him, then nodded once and transmitted the codes. Jason turned without another word. Zarak followed. The network of maintenance corridors beneath the Academy was vast and mostly forgotten, an older infrastructure designed during wartime contingencies. Lights flickered in unreliable patterns, and the stale air hummed with the sound of ancient fans and filtered gases. Jason moved with precision, watching shadows for movement, gauging Max's ears like an instrument of truth. They came to a hatch. Jason keyed the access code. The door opened on shrieking metal. Inside, darkness, deeper than any corridor should hold. Jason drew a compact flare from his belt and struck it alive. Light bloomed in red, staining the walls in blood hues. Max snarled, a visceral, involuntary sound. Zarak paused at the threshold. "What is that smell?" Jason didn't answer. He knelt and touched the floor. Moist. Sticky. His fingers came away dark. It wasn't just water. Far down the corridor, a shape shifted. Nothing more than a blur. But it moved with purpose, swift, calculated. Jason stood. "It's watching us." Zarak's wings buzzed. "Why hasn't it attacked?" "Because it doesn't need to," Jason said. Yet, he tossed the flare forward. It arced, hit the floor, spun. Light caught something. Claws. Too many legs. Teeth where none should be. And then the thing vanished down a side shaft with impossible speed. Jason turned and sealed the hatch again. Zarak stood frozen. "That's inside the academy?" Jason nodded once. "Now do you understand?" Zarak's eyes didn't blink. "What is it?" "Don't know. But it's not from Earth. Not from the Alliance, either. It's using the Academy as breeding ground or hunting ground. I'm not sure which." Zarak swayed on his legs. "How long has it been here?" "Long enough to learn the patterns. It's not random. It's studying us." "And what do we do?" Jason looked down at Max, who was still trembling with tension. "We stop being prey." Back at the Hall of Governance, the Los reviewed the data with expressionless efficiency. Jason stood at attention, letting the footage and biometric traces speak for themselves. Zarak remained beside him, silent but firm. Los did not interrupt. When the display dimmed, he steepled his fingers. This was not anticipated. "No," Jason said, "but it's already in motion." Los tapped his desk. "We cannot evacuate without causing panic." Jason shook his head. "We don't evacuate. We isolate. Lock the lower sectors. Flush the vents with cryogas. And track movement with sensor arrays tuned to its biofrequency." Los raised a brow. "You speak as if you've done this before." Jason's jaw tightened. "My last station didn't get that chance." The room went still. Los inclined his head. "Very well. You have operational control of Subsector 6. Take only what you need." Jason nodded. "I need Zarak. And Max." Zarak startled. "Me? You know the maintenance schematics," Jason said. "And Max needs a second pair of hands." Zarak stared at him. Then, with visible hesitation, he said, "Very well." Los tapped the console again. "Then may wisdom walk with you." Jason turned, Max trotting beside him, and Zarak followed, heart racing. They descended again that night, this time armed. Jason carried a magnetic rifle, its charge hum barely audible. Zarak wore an exoframe for strength. Max padded between them like a wraith, every step measured. The deeper levels had changed. The air had weight now, smelled of rot and rust. The corridors were scored, deep gouges in the metal, like claws searching for softness. "Why here?" Zarak whispered. Jason scanned the walls. "Because we stopped looking." Then Max froze. His head tilted. He growled, then barked. The sound ricocheted like gunfire in the silence. Something was coming. Fast. Jason lifted the rifle. Zarak's breath caught in his chest. Around the corner, a blur of limbs and bone and hunger hurtled at them. Jason fired. The bolt lit the tunnel with a harsh blue flare. The creature shrieked, but didn't fall. It lunged. Max launched. Fur and fangs met claws and screeching alien sinew in a blur. The corridor erupted into chaos. Jason shouted something, inaudible over the cacophony. Then the light shattered. Darkness swallowed everything. But Max never stopped barking. Not once. Darkness bled through every corner of the corridor, thick and suffocating, as if the shadows themselves had been weaponized. Jason couldn't see, couldn't hear anything except the chaos of scraping claws, Max's savage barking, and the whine of overstressed metal. The flashlight clipped to his shoulder flared briefly before dying completely, fried by the electromagnetic pulse from the rifle's high-powered discharge. He blinked hard, recalibrating his visor's night mode manually. A flicker of green returned to the display, blurry heat outlines, but it was enough. Max was grappling with the creature just meters ahead, a knot of fur and fangs against sinew and spines. The thing had limbs that bent the wrong way and skin that shimmered with chameleon interference. It twisted like it wasn't built to obey the laws of flesh. Jason didn't hesitate. He surged forward, pulled Max back by the harness, and fired point-blank into the exposed undercarriage of the beast. The impact flung it sideways with a screech that made the lights above them flicker once more. It hit the corridor wall and collapsed with a thud, twitching. Zarak stared from behind a wall of cracked conduit piping, his thorax vibrating with terror. "Is it dead?" Jason didn't answer. He moved cautiously toward the body, Max growling beside him, the dog's hackles raised like spears. The thing's limbs twitched in a rhythm too precise to be involuntary. Its body shimmered again, light bending around it like warped glass. Jason knelt beside it, examining the damage. "No," he said quietly, "just playing dead." He raised his rifle again, but it was too late. The creature exploded into motion, using its entire frame like a coiled spring. It slammed into Jason with bone-snapping force, knocking the weapon from his hands and pinning him against the far wall. Claws scraped across his armor, finding weaknesses in the joints. Jason gritted his teeth and grabbed the creature's jaw with both hands, forcing it back as Max lunged again, clamping onto one of its writhing limbs. Zarak shouted something, but Jason couldn't process it. Everything was motion and noise and pain. Then came a sound, not from the creature, not from Max, from the wall. A low-frequency hum began to pulse from the corridor itself, like the Academy's infrastructure was crying out. Jason's HUD spiked with warnings. Frequencies outside biological ranges. The creature froze. Then it twisted its head violently, like something inside was trying to break free. Zarak ran forward, holding a compact sonic disruptor, a rare tool reserved for subsurface resonance diagnostics. "Move," he shouted. Jason rolled left. Max leapt back. Zarak activated the disruptor. A focused pulse slammed into the corridor. The creature screamed, not in pain, but in fury, as if its camouflage was being unraveled at a molecular level. It staggered backward, limbs flailing, its skin flickering violently between invisible and visible forms. Jason grabbed his rifle and fired again. This time, the shot was aimed at the disruptor itself. The energy from the rifle overloaded the sonic device, creating a shockwave that rippled outward, knocking everyone off their feet. The creature howled one final time and collapsed. This time its body went limp. No twitching, no shifting. It began to decay instantly, as though life had been the only thing keeping its matter bound together. A smell like ozone and burnt blood filled the air. Zarak groaned from across the corridor, antennae twitching erratically. What was that? Jason sat up, breathing hard. A parasite, not just in the vents, in the walls, in the systems. He glanced at Max, who was panting but unharmed. The dog patted over and leaned into Jason's shoulder, whining softly. Jason ran a hand through Max's matted fur, still scanning the corridor. That wasn't the only one. Zarak staggered upright. "There are more." Jason nodded. "At least 3 based on the movement patterns." "We stopped one." Zarak stared at the disintegrating corpse, his mandibles clicking. What species could evolve that kind of stealth? Jason shook his head. "I don't think it evolved. I think it was made." They returned to the surface before the full decay could contaminate the ventilation flow. As the elevator hissed upward, Jason leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. Max lay curled at his feet, chest rising and falling in sync with the hum of the lift. Zarak remained standing, silent. "You're quiet," Jason said without opening his eyes. "I'm reconsidering everything I believed about Earth animals," Zarak murmured. Jason cracked a smile. "Still think he's just a savage?" "No," Zarak admitted. "He protected you. Protected me." Without hesitation, Jason glanced down. "He's not a pet. He's family." They emerged into the command tier, where Dean the Los and 2 security aides awaited them. The look on the Dean's face was not of curiosity. It was grim comprehension. "You found one," the Los said. Jason nodded. Confirmed. It was probing systems from within. It had no intent to communicate or cohabit. It was assimilating infrastructure, preparing for something larger. Thalas's lips thinned. "A vanguard?" "Possibly," Jason replied. "But not the last. I need full access to surveillance subroutines. And perimeter dampeners. We need to root them out now." "You'll have it," the Los said. "And a full task team." Jason raised a hand. "No team. Not yet. Too much noise. Too many variables. Give me 1 cycle. Just me, Max, and Zarak." The Los looked between them. Zarak didn't argue. "Granted," the Dean said after a pause. 1 cycle. Jason turned to leave. "Jason," the Los added. "This creature, why now? Why here?" Jason hesitated. "Because something's coming. And they're scouts. Or infiltrators." He didn't say what was really clawing at the back of his mind. That the creatures weren't just alien. They were familiar. Too engineered. Too precise. Designed with purpose. Designed with knowledge of the Academy's weaknesses. The elevator door closed behind them, and the corridor lights dimmed to mission protocol red. Later that evening, Jason stood at the edge of the inner courtyard, watching Max sniff through patches of flowering stone grass. Zarak approached, carrying a tray with synth protein rations. "I brought food," Zarak said. "Not Earth-grade, but adequate." Jason took it without looking away. "He hasn't eaten." "He will," Zarak said, "when he no longer feels the need to protect." Jason finally looked at him. "You're learning." "I am observing," Zarak corrected. "But I do wonder, what will we become if we survive this?" Jason knelt beside Max, different. "Better. Maybe." Zarak watched the dog for a moment, then added softly, "I used to believe the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy were the ones with claws and teeth." Jason looked up. "And now?" "Now, I believe it's the ones who protect without asking why." Jason stood slowly, eyes narrowing toward the horizon where storm clouds gathered behind the defense field. The air felt heavy again. Charged. Something was coming, and they would be ready. The storm broke just before dawn. Lightning fractured the sky above the planetary dome, casting strobing white arcs across the Academy's silhouette. Inside, alarms pulsed low and slow. No blaring panic, just that dreadful thrum that suggested something had gone wrong long before anyone noticed. Jason moved fast through the maintenance tunnels, rifle slung and visor linked directly to the Academy's dwindling surveillance network. Max paced ahead of him, nose twitching, tail rigid like a taut line. Behind them, Zarak climbed down a narrow access shaft, armored plating dulled from impact damage and soot streaks. "We lost contact with Deck 6, Jason muttered. "Power grid isolated itself. That's not a failure. That's a quarantine." Zarak dropped the last meter, claws scraping against metal. "Then they're making a nest." Jason didn't respond. He just moved faster. They'd found 2 more of the creatures in the last cycle. One already dead, half dissected by internal Academy systems. The other feasting on energy couplings in the cryo research wing. It had taken 3 sonic pulses and a full magazine to bring it down. That one had been different, bigger, smarter. It had mimicked human heat signatures to draw them in. That was when Jason had stopped thinking of them as animals. Now, as they descended into Deck 6, the change was undeniable. The walls pulsed faintly. The air tasted coppery wet. And every light flickered in sync with something that wasn't power regulation. Max whimpered once, then bared his teeth. "I know," Jason whispered. "We're in it now." They reached the security barrier. It had been melted open, partially, as if the creature hadn't needed a full breach, only a narrow passage. Jason squeezed through, Max beside him. Zarak followed, wings tight to his back. Inside, the air was thick with spores. Jason's HUD flared warnings: biohazard contamination, oxygen displacement. But what made him pause wasn't the environment. It was the silence. Everywhere, things were growing. Organic threads wove between data consoles, coiling around exposed piping. Cocoon-like structures lined the corridor edges, half pulsing, half breathing. Jason moved slowly now, not out of fear but precision. He could feel it watching again. The sense of being inside his stomach, swallowed by something ancient and methodical. Zarak stopped beside a wall, his mandibles twitching. "These are not nests. They're communication nodes." Jason frowned. "What?" "They're networked," Zarak said, pointing to the pulsating threads. "They form a signal relay. Organic, but functional." Jason followed the lines with his eyes, and it all made a terrible kind of sense. The creatures weren't just hiding. They were building something. A system. A mind. He scanned the largest cocoon structure, centered around the deck's main power relay. Inside, faint movement stirred. Something larger than any they'd faced. Jason felt his throat tighten. The cocoon opened. Not like a hatch, but like an eye. A massive form unfolded from the dark interior. Part exoskeleton, part machine, all intelligence. Its limbs were longer, armored with biometallic plates. Its head turned slowly, assessing them with calculated disinterest. Not rage, not fear, just observation. Jason raised his rifle. Max growled, low and feral. Zarak reached for the disruptor pack on his back. The creature stepped forward, and the entire room responded. Threads pulled taut. Cocoon systems reactivated. Lights turned red. Power surged, controlled by the entity now standing before them. Jason didn't wait. He fired. The bolt hit dead center, impacting the chest, sending shrapnel and ichor across the floor. But the thing didn't fall. It roared, and then it moved. It crossed the distance in 2 strides. Jason barely dodged the swing of one bladed limb, the impact splitting the corridor floor like paper. Max lunged, but the creature anticipated, swatting the dog mid-air into a wall. Jason shouted Max's name and dove to intercept, firing shot after shot into its flank. The rounds barely slowed it. Zarak circled behind, hurling a disruptor grenade. The explosion lit the corridor in blinding white. But when the smoke cleared, the creature remained. Staggered, not broken. Jason grabbed Max, the dog stunned but conscious, eyes wide with pain and fury. "We can't win a straight fight," Zarak shouted. "It's too evolved." Jason dragged Max behind a collapsed control module. "Then we don't fight fair." He pulled up the security interface on his wrist console, still linked to the older backup grid. Enough for what he needed. He began rerouting power from all surrounding decks, redirecting fusion vent conduits through Deck 6 maintenance exhausts. "Buy me 30 seconds, he barked to Zarak. The alien nodded once, then sprinted forward, drawing the creature's attention with a high-frequency emitter from his exosuit. The beast followed, slamming through bulkheads, roaring with machine-augmented lungs. Jason worked faster. Max struggled to his feet, bleeding from the shoulder. "No, stay," Jason snapped. But Max didn't listen. He limped forward, taking position beside Zarak. Jason sealed the last conduit. "Zarak," he shouted. The alien disengaged and ran full speed back, his carapace smoking. Max followed, dragging his left leg. The creature charged after them. But by then, Jason had already triggered the override. Heat roared through the corridor. A wall of fusion-vented plasma ignited in a contained blast, catching the creature mid-pursuit. It screamed, not in pain, but rage, as its body ignited, biometal boiling from within. It collapsed into the nest it had built. Fire consumed everything. Systems sparked, threads burned, cocoons exploded into ash. Then silence. Real silence. Jason exhaled. He limped to Max and dropped to his knees. The dog was still breathing, still watching him. "Hey," Jason whispered. "You stayed." Max let out a small bark, then collapsed against him. Zarak knelt nearby, smoke curling from his wingtips. "Is it over?" Jason looked around. Not just destruction, but sterilization. The nest was gone. The system it had built disconnected. "For now," he said. "That was the central node. Cut the head, the body falls." Zarak looked hollowed out, antennae limp. "They sent it ahead. A builder. A signal processor." Jason nodded. "And if they send a scout, others will come looking when it doesn't report back." Zarak raised his gaze. "Then what now?" Jason looked at Max, then up toward the ceiling, toward the planetary sky and stars beyond. "Now we prepare. We tell the others. We fortify the academy, turn it into what it was always meant to be, a place that survives, not just teaches." He stood slowly, lifting Max in his arms. Zarak rose beside him. "I was wrong about you, about your kind, about him." Jason gave a faint smile. "You weren't wrong, just early." They walked out of Deck 6 together, smoke trailing behind them, but no more silence. Outside, the storm had passed. The sky was clearing. And somewhere behind the clouds, a threat still loomed. But Earth had sent its best weapon. Not just soldiers, not just intellect, but loyalty. Tenacious, unyielding, bone-deep loyalty in the form of a dog who refused to run. And the galaxy would remember that. The savage Earth animal was never savage. He was the first line of defense.